Welcome back to the studio. You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Shona Bhattacharya. Here's a look at our top stories. In this edition, the political crisis continues in Gambia. President Jammeh has named a mediator to talk with the opposition while criticizing foreign mediation efforts. Ramping up security ahead of an Africa-France summit in Mali. Security forces are patrolling the streets in the hopes of avoiding an attack. 35 heads of state will be attending the summit that begins Friday. And just 3 days to go before the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Gabon. 16 nations are vying for the top prize. Gambia sinks deeper into crisis. President Yahya Jammeh, who refuses to accept the results of the December 1st election, says he's appointed a mediator to meet with all parties. This as representatives from the West African regional ECOWAS bloc are expected to arrive in Banjul, the capital, on Friday. Jammeh has criticized their initiative as well as the threat to send in regional troops. He calls the level of foreign interference, quote, unprecedented, and has expelled 3 Senegalese journalists.
Our review and investigations have revealed an unprecedented level of foreign interference in our elections and internal affairs, and also a sustained smear campaign, propaganda, and misinformation.
President Jammeh says he wants this resolved constitutionally. And so we're talking about if there is no Supreme Court sitting this January, it's likely to be in May or even in November. We can't see, with the facts available on the ground, judging from the anomalies committed by the Electoral Commission, there's no way a Supreme Court can rule that Jammeh should step down. So practically, that's not going to happen. The ECOWAS and African Union mediators will be going to see Jammeh with one main proposal, that he should step aside, which Jammeh is not prepared to do. So in all practicality, we're looking at a scenario ahead where Jammeh would say he wants another election conducted.
Now, you said before that ECOWAS's announcement, the regional bloc, their announcement that they'll send troops into Gambia if Jammeh does not step down, that is an empty threat. Why do you say that?
The ECOWAS threat to send troops, it's practically unlikely because we know their track record. In 2013, they made a lot of noise that they were going to send troops to Mali, and they did not. And in 2015, they made a lot of noise they were going to send troops to Burkina Faso, and they did not. It's only about 14 months since Burkina Faso. I cannot see ECOWAS being able to actually honor their promise or even a threat to send troops to Gambia. And in any case, if they did that, it's only going to cause more chaos and will not bring peace to the sub-region.
Preparing for the 27th Africa-France summit that opens this Friday. The meeting will take place in Bamako, the Malian capital, that's seen increased security measures. Some roads have been closed and hotels are under strict surveillance. Special anti-terrorism units have also been deployed to ensure security in light of the November 2015 terrorist attack on the Radisson Blu Hotel that left more than 20 people dead. Our correspondent on the ground brings you this report.
The Malian capital under tight surveillance. Hundreds of cameras will monitor the streets and beyond during the Africa-France summit. Live on these screens, security teams will watch the arrival of heads of state as they move from the airport to their hotels.
You can see a delegation on the screen. They leave here, and we pick them up here, at the roundabout. We followed them the whole way. You can see there's less than 30 meters between each surveillance point, between each police officer.
The tightest watch is being kept on hotels and the conference centre.
More than 10,000 men have been deployed for the whole mission. As you can see, the guard stretches from the airport to the hotels and the site of the conference. But it even goes along to the river.
Amongst the security personnel are 180 anti-terror specialists. The unit was created a year ago, following the deadly terrorist attack on Bamako's Radisson Blu Hotel.
We are very well prepared for the summit. Rapid response equipment is already in place close to hotels and the conference center. And at our headquarters, we have backup teams. So if there is a problem, we can be on site within 5 minutes.
It will be difficult for residents to get around the capital during the summit. On Friday, the majority of businesses and schools will be closed.
Let's take a look at what's making headlines elsewhere on the continent. Clashes broke out on the Tunisian side of the border with Libya at the town of Ben Guerdan, as well as at the border crossing at Ras Jadir. Several dozen protesters gathered outside official buildings, and according to a private radio, security forces intervened using tear gas after they were targeted by stone throwers. The protesters were demanding the free flow of trade with Libya that's mired in political chaos and fighting between militias. A new government in Ivory Coast. A day after naming new prime minister and vice president, President Alassane Ouattara named his new government team. It's smaller, with just 28 ministers and a secretary of state, compared with 35 posts previously. 7 new members were sworn in. The changes that correspond to constitutional changes voted through in November were delayed by a 2-day mutiny. Still, the defense and interior ministers both kept their jobs. Somalia's Mohamed Osman Jawari was re-elected as the country's parliament speaker in a first-round vote by the country's 259 MPs amid tight security. Somalia is now one step closer to organizing a presidential election as the head of state is chosen by lawmakers. That election has been pushed back several times, but officials say it will take place towards the end of this month. Kenya's main opposition parties are preparing for the country's presidential elections in August. Together, they're decided to field a single candidate in the hopes of unseating President Uhuru Kenyatta. That nominee will be supported by the new National Super Alliance that could pose a serious threat to the current administration. One of the contenders is former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who accused his opponents of rigging the election when he lost in 2007 and 2013. Using solar energy to light up the darkness after Boko Haram. Residents in Gahara, Mujiri, in Nigeria's northeastern Adamawa state, are slowly rebuilding their lives. Their homes were destroyed and infrastructure ruined after attacks by the extremist group 2 years ago. They're using solar energy now to help meet energy demands in an area that's still off the national grid. Nicolas Germain has more.
This village in Nigeria's northeastern Adamawa state was attacked by Boko Haram 2 years ago. Those who fled the violence are slowly returning home as the Nigerian army has recovered much of the territory it had lost to the jihadists. To help the locals, the government and the United Nations introduced solar panels. They are used to power street lighting and, above all, water pumps.
Before the solar, we used to fetch water in the stream. But the solar comes, we stop going to the stream because the solar gives us water so much.
Solar panels have been set up in 8 villages and benefit over 13,000 people who can, for example, charge their mobile phones. In the nearby health centre, patients can now access vaccines. That's because the hospital is using a solar-powered refrigerator to store the vaccines.
So many cases of hepatitis in this community now. And the problem is because they don't have the vaccine earlier. So that's because of the problem they're having now. But now, since we have the vaccine, I believe the case is going to be less.
Nigeria's army has pushed back the Boko Haram group, but it still stages suicide bombings, not only in Nigeria, but in neighbouring countries like Niger, Cameroon and Chad.
And that's the end of this edition of Eye on Africa here on France 24. Do stay tuned. There is more news coming up with Mark Owen. He'll be back in just a few minutes.
نقاش فرانس 24 جدل الآن وحديث وتعليق من وفي كل مكان.
France 24, c'est une passerelle entre les cultures, c'est la diversité.
It's also a great way of sharing it and discussing it on social media.
We give a voice to women and girls, whoever they are, wherever they are.
هل تعرفون باريس؟ أحقاً تعرفونها؟ تابعوا France 24 لمعرفة الناس.
Tout ce que vous avez toujours voulu savoir sur l'Europe, c'est sur notre chaîne.